It's hard to keep up with all of the moves within the wide receiving core at Jackson State, but one thing has remained constant the entire offseason. This group is scary. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'm, of course, Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current site expert at Who Dat Dish and contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU, your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at the APR around HBCUs, both on the good and bad side, more so the great and the bad side, I should say. In segment 2, Amari Jones is transferring to Bethune Cookman, and this is a move that has big dividends for two HBCUs. However, I want to kick this off with Jackson State, the reigning defending Celebration Bowl champions, and I want to revisit a conversation that we had just last week. It is the second time in as many weeks that we've talked about the JSU receiving core, and honestly, I'm kind of happy about it. Not because I just enjoy talking JSU, not because I just enjoy talking about the Tigers or the wide receivers, but I was looking at some of the comments that were under that first episode. In the first episode, to me, the comments felt like maybe my point wasn't being interpreted the way that I intended it to be. Because I seen a lot of people saying Jackson State will be all right. Jackson State will be all right. We still got da. And the overall tone of what I was trying to say last week is that Jackson State is going to be okay. And I think that Isaiah Spencer was the most recent move at that time. And it was a negative move for Jackson State. I stand by that. I still think that is a hurtful move. Even if you have the pieces to replace a guy like Isaiah Spencer, losing him is still a knock. You don't want to have that happen, right? So that would make it a negative. But I kept seeing people saying Jackson State will be this, Jackson State will be that. And my idea was, all I'm saying is you lost Isaiah Spencer, but you gained Nathan Rembert. And those kind of cut off or those kind of cancel out. Maybe putting Spencer in the thumbnail and saying impact loss change the overall tone. Maybe I can own that, but it was just interesting when I was seeing these comments because I'm like, yeah, I agree with you, but I didn't feel the need to say it. So I didn't feel like that needed to be said that Jackson State will be okay. I didn't understand that, right? So I didn't want to make a whole topic about it, but I did kind of want to address that. I thought Jackson State would be fine. Now, maybe they were just adding on to what I was saying, and they weren't trying to tell me that we'll be okay. Maybe they weren't trying to contradict me or anything. So, anyway, the point is Jackson State keeps having new people come in and out of this wide receiving core. And it's interesting to me. Now that we've got beyond just addressing the past episode, there are a lot of things that are still true from that episode that are true now. But I no longer think that Nathan Rembert cancels out the loss of Isaiah Spencer. Last week when we were talking about Spencer leaving and Rembert staying, I said, okay, well, at least you get to keep Rembert, who had entered the portal, even though you lost Spencer, and those two just kind of cancel out. The biggest addition is canceled out by the biggest departure. But I no longer feel that way. I now feel like Shamar Savage is what replaces Isaiah Spencer in the sense that you are going to have a trio of wide receivers. You still have a trio of wide receivers now. And then also what Savage provides is something similar as far as pure numbers, and that's the yards per catch. Isaiah Spencer was one of the best wide receivers in the SWAC when it came to yards per catch at 18.9. And listen, 1.7 yards per catch less is a little bit of a dip, but Savage's 17.2 is still or was still good for seventh in that conference. So to me, the replacement for Isaiah Spencer is now Shamar Savage, because it gives you the huge threat of having three wide receivers, as well as giving you a guy who is going to be a high clip as far as yards per catch goes. So that's what I'm really loving about this move that Jackson State just made. And listen, you can't get all of these guys. I don't think you get Shamar Savage if you keep Isaiah Spencer. You may not lose Isaiah Spencer if you don't get Nathan Rembert. There is a such thing as too many cooks in the kitchen. And I think you want to avoid that, because people want their touches. At the end of the day, the ball can only go around so many times. And wide receivers want their touches. They're trying to build to get to the next level. They're trying to get accolades such as all SWAC. They want to build their profile. They want to build their prospect appeal. So I can't blame them for wanting to leave. But somebody had to go. Somebody just had to go, or somebody wasn't going to show up. And I don't know how much Rembert's leaving the portal had to do with Spencer deciding to go. I just feel like at the end of the day, there is a factor of you want to make sure you are in the best position to get as many touches as you possibly can, especially knowing what the long-term goal was. Now with Spencer getting all these P4 offers, I don't necessarily know that was the biggest selling point. I think somebody probably got in his ear and was like, look, you could go to Virginia Tech. You could go to West Virginia. You could go to whatever, But I'll say this. The reason I was the most concerned about losing Isaiah Spencer above everything else, because he does so much on the field. But the reason I was most concerned about losing Isaiah Spencer for Jackson State is that you no longer had this triumvirate of wide receivers. And to me, that's something that not a lot of teams have. That's something that not a lot of teams are equipped to deal with. We saw that with South Carolina State just last season. They had three wide receivers that were all studs. They could all go out there and play, and they could take over on any given day. Jackson State lost that ability to me when they lost Isaiah Spencer, but they gained it again now that they have Shamar Savage. So interestingly enough, you mentioned South Carolina State in this conversation. They're the inverse of the Bulldogs, because South Carolina State had two smaller wide receivers with one bigger guy. Meanwhile, Jackson State's going to roll out with Twin Towers and Nathan Rembert in the middle. So let's look at these dimensions, because Nathan Rembert, 5'9", 170. Shamar Savage, 6'4", 210. Joanes Fortilien, 6'5", 220. So you're looking at two big wide receivers in Fortilien and Savage, and then you'll have Rembert, who will be a smaller guy. It's the exact opposite of what you had with South Carolina State, but it's also a very similar impact, because Fortilien, Rembert, Savage, they can all go off on any given day. Savage was one of the top wide receivers for PV. He's going to bring a physical presence and a high yards per catch clip. You're looking at Nathan Rembert, who was a first-team All-SWAC. He was one of two wide receivers who was actually, cleared the 1,000-yard mark. Joanes Fortilien, you're looking at guy, most touchdowns in the conference. So you go through, it's not just dimensions. You have each one, a defining trait. Savage, stand out for PV. Fortilien led the conference in touchdowns. You're looking at Rembert, led the conference in catches and was also one of the top receivers as far as yards go. So you had everything here. I think that this is a very talented bunch. I'm going to say that. This is a very, very talented bunch. I don't think that there is a better comparison for where Jackson State stands going into 2025 in their passing attack than South Carolina State from 2024. Ironically, we did just talk about them yesterday, starting from scratch. But when you look at where they were in 24, they had two wide receivers of the similar build. They were smaller, one bigger guy. You look at Jackson State, they have two bigger guys and one smaller guy. But at the end of the day, it's the same advantage. When I looked at South Carolina State, you may have somebody who could stop Caden High. You may have somebody who can stop Justin Smith-Brown. You may have somebody who can stop Ionaj Carter. But I doubt you got three people who can stop all three of them in the same game. Yes, Jackson State was able to minimize the Bulldog passing attack. But now you go into 2025 and Jackson State has that same advantage. Can you stop Fortilien? Okay. Can you stop Savage? Okay. Can you stop Rembert? Okay. But are you going to be able to stop all three of them? And I expect I know this is only the beginning of May, but I expect that to be very difficult for any team to do, let alone multiple teams to do. And that's going to be a huge advantage. I seen somebody say, well, TC doesn't want to throw the ball anyway. So that was on last time I talked about this, before you even got Savage. Listen, TC to me has shown himself to be a very good play caller. And being a very good play caller means adapting to what you have. Jackson State threw the ball seventh most, so pretty much middle of the pack, and they had the ninth most yards. So maybe I have those flipped. But regardless, they were middle of the pack in attempts and completions. But you had Irv Mulligan. So what are we really talking about here? Yes, you had a small amount of attempts. You didn't throw the ball that much. You probably didn't throw it as much as you wanted them to. But at the end of the day, I had Irv Mulligan. So yes, I'm going to lean on 5. That's what I feel like the crystal clear and correct approach would be in this situation. So I don't necessarily think that fear of not passing the football should be prevalent. Yes, Rembert won't have 1,000 yards. I doubt that'll happen because he has more capable wide receivers around him. People numbers are going to take a dip, but I think everybody can play a role. And if you're a Jackson State fan, you're probably looking more so towards the team success anyway. As you push forward. Now, I know this is all about team. It's the ultimate team sport, but Amari Jones is going to lead Bethune-Cookman, and I think we should view him differently because he is a quarterback. I'll talk about that more as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Upwork, and scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can deliver specialized freelancers to your company in marketing, development, design, and more, experts who are ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands on a project or a long-term partner, Upwork is hiring or making hiring simple and affordable. I love that. Cost efficient, fast, easy for my people like me who are not great when it comes to technology. So this is what I would do. I'd visit upwork.com right now and post my job for free. That's what you should do too. That's upwork.com. That's upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Please help find yourself some affordable top tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On NFL. We're getting close to rookie minicamps and schedule release, so you want to make sure that you are checking out Locked On NFL once again. Amari Jones is transferring to Bethune-Cookman, and I know in my lead and my tease, I kind of talked about how he'll be leading Bethune-Cookman. Is that guaranteed? No, but I do expect that to be the case. I'll tell you why I expect that to be the case, and also the other school that is impacted. But I want to kick it off by explaining why I look at this completely different. Amari Jones was at Florida International the last 2 seasons. He didn't play much when he was with the Panthers, but he was at Florida International for the last 2 seasons. This spring, I guess, winter, however you want to phrase it, it was early in the year, so I guess still technically winter. This winter, he transferred to South Carolina State. Now he's transferring to Bethune-Cookman. After just a spring practice, after just a couple of months with the Bulldogs, he said, I want to be a Wildcat. And normally, I would look at this extremely skeptically. Normally, I would look at this and be concerned. You could use Nathan Rembert. I talked about how strange it was that Rembert was entering the portal after just joining Jackson State a couple of months ago. And I think that with most players, I will view it this way. Like I said, football is the ultimate team game, but when it comes to the quarterback position, you view it completely differently. They're viewed independently. I think that when it comes to this decision in particular, I'm not going to expand it today. I'm just going to keep it very focused on what it is in this situation. Amari Jones, if he was a wide receiver, I would say that this is indecisiveness. If he was a wide receiver, I would question why he isn't comfortable in these different places. I would say it was bad. I would think about if this was bad decision-making. I would have a lot of questions. And I think the reasons we don't have questions when it comes to quarterbacks doing moves like this is because we make assumptions. When it comes to quarterbacks making moves like this, we assume that it's solely because of what's on the field. I don't love post spring practice transfers. I really don't. I don't get hype about them. I don't know. They just don't do it for me. But when it comes to the quarterback position, I'm times five. Like I'm super excited because I think I know what this means every single time. Every single time, I think I'm fully aware of what is coming next. This is to me, anytime you get a quarterback after spring practice, you are getting him to be your starter because spring practice is the first real point of evaluation. Um, I can't remember who I was talking about this with, but we're talking about basically spring practice being the moment of evaluation for all of the talent. And then we'll decide what to do after spring ball. And that's where you are for every team. That wasn't unique to that situation, but I don't want to quote the wrong coach, right? So um but anyway, I'm trying to think about who it was, but I can't. I have a couple of options, but I don't want to get it wrong. You're evaluating your team. You're actually able to see what improvements or lack of improvements that each player has made coming into the offseason. There is so much more that you can base your decisions off of once you get through spring practice. And to me, when you bring in a quarterback after spring practice, it tells me I don't really love these quarterbacks. And as a guy who with Saints Wire, now with the Who Dat Dish, I'm out here telling you all about quarterbacks and rookies and veterans. I understand what it feels like to go to a draft and say, are we drafting a quarterback? I just did it. This was our approach. Our approach, like I was part of the team, but this was our approach in the coverage. If you don't love that quarterback, don't get that quarterback. I know that that's a conversation that's usually had around whether or not to draft a quarterback, but I think that that goes really at any moment. If you don't love that quarterback, try to find someone you do love. And for Bethune Cookman, I think that may be Amari Jones. At the end of the day, I felt this way about CJ Montes versus Tyler Jefferson at FAMU. If you don't love a quarterback, why are you sticking with him unless you have to? When it came to the Saints, I'm sitting here like, yeah, look, if you don't love Tyler Shuck, you don't love Shador Sanders, you don't love Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, don't pick them, especially not at 40. That was my mindset. So now I'm taking that same thought process, and obviously Bethune Cookman doesn't have the 40th overall pick. It's not something that you could really apply there, but the premise is the same. If I don't love you, I need to go to that portal and see if I have somebody I can love. That's just the way that I view it. That's the way that I would approach it, me personally. Secondly, it impacts South Carolina State. And where it impacts South Carolina State is I actually forgot about Amari Jones because I've been so one-track minded. I've been so tunnel focused on Ryan Stubblefield and what Ryan Stubblefield would do, because to me, that was going to be the starter for South Carolina State. This only proves it because you don't leave South Carolina State unless you know you're not getting that job. That's how I feel. I don't think you're dissatisfied unless you know you're not getting that job. What is the point? You went there under the premise that you would be a starting quarterback. Now you're not. So now you're not there. And I wouldn't go to Bethune Cookman if I didn't have a conversation of how do you feel about your quarterback room? And I need to hear I'm displeased. I need to hear that you are going to be the guy. That's the way that I view it. That's what I would do. And I'm placing some of my own belief and some of my own assumed operation on what I think Amari Jones did. Now let's compare the two situations that Amari Jones has stepped into this year, because in 2025 he's been in two schools and he's been in two different scenarios. That's important because he did play in the spring semester with South Carolina State. You have to look at where you are, who is around. Ryan Stubblefield was there. Ryan Stubblefield was with South Carolina State in 2024 as well. Not only did Stubblefield play for South Carolina State, he played in the Celebration Bowl. There was a time, like I think that a lot of people forget, because the Bulldogs had a phenomenal season. They had a really powerful offense, powerful wide receiving core. We talked about them, just referenced them at least, just last segment. But Eric Phoenix got benched in the Celebration Bowl, and they brought Ryan Stubblefield in. Now, he didn't perform greatly in that game, but he did have a strong start in the season finale. And he played in the Celebration Bowl, which to me shows a great level of trust from a coaching staff that is still there at South Carolina State. You compare it to Bethune Cookman. Bethune Cookman, they didn't have a good offense last year. I like some of the things that Sprague was able to do, but in general, you're not looking at them and saying, "Oh man, what a juggernaut." They were pretty middle of the pack as far as passing yards go. They were just cool all around. They were just cool, if not below average. So if I'm thinking about what is my best route to the field, now let's be clear. I do think that he wanted to go to the better team. I'm not advocating go to worse teams because you'll get on the field. He went to a better team and it just didn't work out for him. But if we're comparing where he is versus where he was, I think he has a easier chance of getting onto the field because there's just less competition that's already built in with strong history. History ain't all strong, but strong history is definitely a difficult thing for you to counteract. So anyway, I think that Amari Jones is stepping into a better situation at Bethune Cookman for him to get on the field. I think that he left South Carolina State because it became clear that he wasn't getting on the field. But let's talk about something that isn't field related. Let's talk about athletes, but in the classroom, because North Carolina Central got a perfect APR, something that barely anybody on the FCS or FBS level has ever done or rarely does. And I also want to talk about a couple of teams, a couple of schools that they didn't fare so well in the classroom, and they're going to have to pay the consequences for it. Let's do all of that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and I want to get some NFL action in here. I know we're in the middle of the NBA playoffs, and please go make some money on whatever playoff game that you choose. Wolves versus Warriors, Cavaliers versus Pacers, Thunder versus Nuggets. Doesn't matter to me. But if you still want to get some football action in, something that's going to take a little bit longer to pay off, Travis Hunter, the former Jackson State Tiger, he has some interesting bets on here. 1 receiving touchdown, 1 interception in his debut. 75 catches, 2 interceptions over the season, 5 offensive touchdowns, 1 defensive touchdown. It's interesting. It's interesting. It's definitely a way to make a little bit of money and a little bit of a gamble as well. So you go ahead and go to fanduel.com. And if you're new, you get $200 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 bet. I suggest putting down a simpler bet, get a quick return, and then go to something that's a little bit more challenging like Travis Hunter. But that's just me. So if I were you, go ahead and go to fanduel.com. If you are new, put down a $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Go to fanduel.com to make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. The APR is all about checking academic progress. It's all about checking make sure that you're staying up to date. It's a benchmark, right? They want to make sure that you are not just producing athletes, you're producing student athletes. And when you're not producing them at a high enough clip and your grade is low, you're going to get sanctions. But I want to start off with the good, which is something that, and I want to start off with the great, actually. And that is something that rarely happens for any school, and it happened for North Carolina Central. They walked away with a perfect APR. This is from the 23-24 school year, so just a calendar year ago. So go back about 365 days, you'll be in that. And Trey Oliver said, I am incredibly proud of our football team and their achievement of earning a perfect APR score over 1,000. This is more than just a number for us. This is academic equivalent of winning a national championship. It speaks volumes about the kind of young men we recruit, the intentional culture we've built, and the total commitment of our coaching and academic staff. Said at North Carolina Central, our football team's motto is culture over scheme, and this milestone is a direct reflection of that philosophy. This was phenomenal, man. And it's one thing to have a great score, because TSU men's basketball had a great score, but to have a perfect score is something that barely anybody achieves on a yearly basis. For North Carolina Central, obviously, I don't think this goes without saying, so I'll mention it, but this is the best APR score that they've ever had. We've seen APR scores raised around the country, but unfortunately, that hasn't been the case for everybody. For Central, they had a GPA of 3.0 or better in both the fall and spring semester last year. So that was great. I think that should be applauded. But at the same time, you have other schools who they aren't doing too well. And I think it means a little bit different. So if you don't hit a certain threshold, I think it's 930. If you don't hit that threshold, you're going to get some sort of sanction. So FAMU, Mississippi Valley State, and UAPB, they all got a level 1 penalty this year because they were in the 900s, but they did not meet the 930 score quota. FAMU just loses some practice time. Mississippi Valley State and UAPB get the same, but they also get a postseason ban. That means a little something, but especially where they are right now, I don't know how long that ban is. That ban is, I don't know, I keep wanting to say put a D at the end, but Mississippi Valley State, UAPB, postseason ban, whatever. I wonder if that extends to the Celebration Bowl, though. FAMU doesn't have to worry about that, and they're the ones most likely set up to get a postseason bid somewhere. But I'll tell you what does matter, and that is in men's basketball and women's basketball. So, Coppin State, Delaware State, Howard, Mississippi Valley State, they all were below the threshold. For Delaware State and Howard, it just says level 1. I don't know if that's just losing. I think level 1 is just losing your practice time. You have to have that minimized. But Coppin State is postseason ineligible in men's basketball. What that means is no CIT, no NIT, no big dance. If you have a great season and you end up winning the MEAC tournament, you just go home. And I think that's tough because there are more opportunities in basketball than there are in football for you to make the postseason. So when I'm looking at these bans, I'm like, okay, cool. UAPB football can't get a postseason game. Who cares? Like, really, at the end of the day, who cares about that? So those are the only ones, I guess. UAPB, Mississippi Valley State, Coppin State men's basketball. You have some other teams who are level 1 penalties, but you have nobody else who actually comes in and walks away with a postseason ban. You don't want to minimize your practice time. You don't want that, but at the same time, you'll be fine. You will be perfectly fine. But a postseason ban is where you do get concerned. On tomorrow's episode, we'll talk about HBCU sports ranking the top 5 defenses in the MEAC, I believe. I don't think it's the entire HBCU. Let me see. I had it pulled up. Just the best defenses in the MEAC. Oh, yeah. So we're just ranking the MEAC. We'll get into that tomorrow on tomorrow's episode. But in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.